If I stop uploading here, you can find me via my website in the description below. Chapter 1. 1499 Armor Origin Talismans. The large azure bird flew through the air as an astonishingly rapid streak of azure light, covering a distance of over 100 feet with each and every flap of its wings. As Han Li hurtled through the air in his Tianpeng form, he activated the Great Development Technique with all his might, using his powerful spiritual sense to forcibly envelop the tracking marks planted in his body by the 4 demon monarchs. However, those tracking marks were simply too powerful, even though he had unleashed several secret techniques from the Great Development treasured scriptures and also used the Tianpeng power he attained following his transformation. He was still only able to temporarily repress those marks. It would only take around a day and a night by his estimation before those marks would take effect again. Han Li was naturally doing this to lure the demon monarchs into thinking that he was dead, thereby making it easier for him to do what he had to do next, and that was to save Yuan Yao and Yan Li, then take them to an area with immense yin qi so they could remove the tracking marks within his body. Only then would he truly be freed from the demon monarchs. Under normal circumstances, Han Li naturally wouldn't be able to achieve this. But with the infernal lightning beast stirring up trouble for the demon monarchs, there was a chance for him. He hadn't bought the demon monarchs a lot of time, so they had most likely only just entered the Divine Pond area not too long ago. Even if they knew that this beast was on its way back, there was no way that they'd be willing to let all their prior efforts go to waste and give up on the divine infernal river elixir. After the infernal lightning beast escaped from the 9 palaces' heavenly talismans, it would return to its lair, undoubtedly in a thunderous rage, just in time to encounter the demon monarchs, and all hell would break loose then. As long as he didn't have to face any of the demon monarchs in direct battle, there was a very good chance that he'd be able to save Yuan Yao and Yan Li. With those thoughts racing through his mind, Han Li flew rapidly through the air. Just as he was about to re-enter the grey mountain ranges, a dull thump suddenly rang out from his Tianpeng body. Azure light flashed and he reverted back to his human form. He then rustled his sleeve to produce a white jade badge that landed in his palm. There was an image of a massive 9-palace diagram carved onto the face of the jade badge, but the badge itself had already been shattered into countless pieces. Han Li's expression changed slightly as he took a reflexive glance behind himself. He then stowed away the jade badge before sweeping a hand over his storage bracelet, and spiritual light flashed as a purple talisman with mysterious silver runes shimmering over its surface appeared in his hand. It was none other than the High Zenith Invisibility Talisman. Han Li released the talisman without any hesitation, and it exploded in mid-air. Several shimmering silver runes then emerged before dancing in the air above Han Li. The runes then transformed into clouds of silver mist that instantly enshrouded his entire body. The silver mist dissipated moments later, and Han Li had completely disappeared. Having attained an insubstantial body, Han Li slowly drifted downward before hiding at the foot of a massive tree, then looking up at the sky with rapt focus. After a long while, a rumbling thunderclap finally erupted in the distant sky. Moments later, lightning flashed overhead, and the infernal lightning beast sped past with arcs of silver lightning revolving around its body, having completely failed to detect Han Li's presence down below. Following a few flashes, the infernal lightning beast disappeared into the distance. Han Li's eyes flashed and he remained hidden beneath the tree. After about 7 or 8 more minutes, he felt that enough time had passed, and only then did he slowly re-emerge within a flash of silver light. Several silver runes flew out of his body, then combined together to form a purple talisman again. Han Li waved a hand through the air, and the talisman disappeared up his sleeve as a streak of purple light. Immediately thereafter, he sped into the distance as a streak of azure light, traveling along the exact same route that the infernal lightning beast had just taken. Not long after that, Han Li arrived back at the black light barrier from which he'd originally set off. The azure light around him faded, and he hovered in mid-air to survey the situation down below, upon which his expression changed slightly. There was an acrid, smoky scent in the air, and thousands of sets of ghostly remains littered the ground below, large patches of which had been charred black. It seemed that this place had been ravaged by lightning, and there were yin winds surging through the air, as well as residual fluctuations from an extremely powerful restriction. It seemed that a restriction had been forcibly destroyed after it had only been set up halfway. A hint of surprise and bewilderment flashed through his eyes upon seeing this. He was naturally unaware of the fact that the crimson-armored puppet and its subordinates had arrived at this place, following his departure, after the weeping soul beast had devoured the white-robed ghostly woman. These ghostly beings were completely unaware that the infernal lightning beast was already on its way back. As such, they had no time to take evasive measures and were naturally destroyed by the infuriated beast. If the crimson-armored puppet were to learn of the fact that all of its subordinates outside had been killed, it would definitely fly into a thunderous rage. If the white-robed ghostly woman had used the myriad distance talisman to inform everyone of the infernal lightning beast's return, then all of the ghostly beings could hide until the beast had passed through before continuing to set up their formation. That was why the puppet had asked its subordinates to deploy a high-grade ghostly being to track Han Li and the infernal lightning beast. But never would it have thought that Han Li would completely ruin its plans. Han Li circled around in the air at low altitudes and didn't discover any living ghostly beings in the nearby area. He didn't know whether they'd all been destroyed by the infernal lightning beast or if the survivors had all fled the scene. However, he didn't delve any further into this issue before turning his gaze toward the shimmering blue passageway, and he began to stroke his chin with a contemplative look on his face. All of a sudden he rustled a sleeve to hurl forth a stack of silver talismans, and it was another set of 9 palaces' heavenly talismans. Due to how difficult these talismans were to refine, Han Li only had 2 sets in total. He had already used 1 set, so this was naturally his final set. Han Li made a hand seal and cast a series of incantation seals onto the stack of talismans. An incredible scene ensued. The silver talismans rushed into the passageway at Han Li's behest, then disappeared into thin air. It seemed that Han Li had unleashed some kind of secret technique to conceal these talismans. Han Li withdrew his hand seal before blue light flashed through his eyes as he assessed the locations where these talismans had been concealed, and he nodded with a pleased expression in response to what he saw. A thought then occurred to him, and he flipped a palm over to produce 2 more silver talismans. However, these talismans were much different compared to the 9 palaces' heavenly talismans. There weren't any runes flashing on those talismans, but there was a faint humanoid figure inscribed onto each talisman. The facial features of both humanoid figures were quite indistinct, but the suits of golden armor they were wearing were quite clearly depicted. One of the humanoid figures was wielding a golden spear, while the one on the other talisman held twin sabers in its hands. What was strange was that these 2 humanoid figures were moving around on the talismans and brandishing their weapons, from time to time, as if they were alive. As soon as Han Li summoned these 2 talismans, he rubbed his hands together. The talismans exploded amid 2 dull thumps and a flash of silver light. 2 golden projections emerged within the silver light, then hurtled downward and disappeared into the ground, merging with Han Li's shadow. Han Li wasn't hovering very high up in the sky, but his shadow on the ground was still extremely faint. Even so, the 2 golden projections were still able to conceal themselves into his shadow without a trace. These were none other than the armor origin talismans that Han Li had refined according to the method recorded on that half-page of the Golden Jade Tome. He had only refined 3 of these talismans in total, yet he was using up 2 of them here, thereby providing a sufficient indication of how seriously he was taking this operation. It was no wonder that this was the case, after all. All of the beings within the black light barrier were fearsome beings at or above the body integration stage. He wouldn't even be able to take on any single one of them, so he had to prepare as thoroughly as he could. After using up 2 of his armor origin talismans, Han Li still wasn't satisfied. He opened his mouth to expel a ball of silver flames, which then transformed into the spirit-engulfing fire raven. He then raised a hand to produce a dozen or so azure lightning beads, all of which were swallowed by the bird. Immediately thereafter, the fire raven flew up onto a massive tree nearby before concealing itself from view. After doing all that, Han Li exhaled to compose himself before he raised his hand to summon the high zenith invisibility talisman again. The talisman exploded, and his body took on an insubstantial form as he hovered soundlessly into the blue passageway. After passing through the black light barrier, Han Li surveyed his surroundings, and he immediately furrowed his brows. The area around him was extremely dark, and there were only a few azure rocks situated an indeterminate distance away that were glowing with a faint light. making Han Li feel as if he'd returned to the Umbra realm again. However, with his spirit eyes, the darkness naturally didn't faze him. Han Li narrowed his eyes slightly, and everything around him became clear as day. The surrounding area seemed to be extremely bleak and desolate, with nothing on the ground aside from a few rocks of different sizes. There weren't even any tall trees around, and the occasional patches of plant life he could see were all shot bushes and scrubs. Han Li inhaled a few times to find that the spiritual qi in the surrounding area was quite abundant and rich, which made the scenes around him rather perplexing. However, he didn't remain in this place to ponder the situation for too long. Instead, he continued onward, venturing deeper into this unknown land. Even though he didn't know where this so-called divine pond was, it certainly couldn't be wrong for him to head toward the center of the restriction. Even after adopting an insubstantial body, Han Li was still traveling quite quickly, covering a distance of close to 10 kilometers in the blink of an eye. Han Li's eyes then immediately lit up as he discovered a palace-like building in the distance. The building was only several hundred feet tall and appeared to have been constructed using ordinary rugged stone blocks. It was the first noteworthy landmark he'd come across, and it indicated that he was heading in the right direction. Thus, Han Li immediately flew toward the palace. The entrance of the palace was a tall and rectangular one that was over 100 feet tall, and a black stone gate had been completely opened outward. Han Li reflexively swept his spiritual sense toward the gate, upon which a peculiar look appeared in his eyes, and he paused on the spot. There were a couple of bursts of powerful yin qi situated on either side of the gate, indicating that there seemed to be a high-grade ghostly being concealed on each side of the entrance. Han Li was slightly surprised to make this discovery, but he was quickly enlightened as he thought of the thousands of ghostly beings that had been destroyed back at the entrance of the blue passageway. Chapter 1. 1500 Divine Infernal River Elixir. However, Han Li didn't want any unforeseen elements affecting his plans, so a hint of killing intent welled up in his heart as he injected his spiritual sense into his spirit beast bracelet. Following a loud ape cry, a streak of black light surged through the air, heading for one side of the entrance while revealed himself and pounced toward the other side. Who goes there? Two cries of surprise erupted from either side of the palace's entrance. Gusts of yin winds were swept up from one end, following which a massive two-headed skeleton appeared. On the other side, the pungent odor of blood and gore wafted through the air as a white-furred zombie with a pair of crimson eyes emerged. The zombie had a pair of green wings on its back that were extremely rank and putrid. Black light flashed and a giant ape appeared. It then immediately let loose a cold harumph, blasting a burst of yellow light out of its nostrils toward the two-headed skeleton. A burst of eerie cackling rang out from the skeleton's mouths as its arms blurred through the air, creating countless claw projections. This high-grade ghostly being was clearly very confident in its body and wanted to tear the soul-devouring light apart with its bare hands, rather than fleeing the scene like the white-robed ghostly woman had. As soon as the two made contact with one another, the claw projections were immediately vanquished by the yellow light, which then surged onward to sweep up the skeleton's bony claws. Yellow light flashed, and the two-headed skeleton let loose a howl of anguish as its bone claws disintegrated into clouds of black mist. The skeleton was shocked by this turn of events, and it hurriedly attempted to hurtle back in retreat. But it was too late. The yellow light continued onward, sweeping up the skeleton's entire body, transforming it into a dense cloud of black mist that was then sucked into the weeping soul beast's mouth. The beast then let loose a cry of elation before turning to appraise Han Li, just in time to see Han Li hovering above the white-furred zombie, while pointing a finger toward the divine essence-fused mountain. The mountain had expanded to over 100 feet in size, and it had trapped the ghostly being down below. Meanwhile, two golden-armored projections had appeared, and both of them were in the process of withdrawing their weapons from the zombie's body. One of them was wielding a spear with arcs of golden lightning surging along its entire length, and the spear had punctured the zombie's heart, creating a charred wound. As for the dual sabers, they had been withdrawn from the zombie's back, following which a layer of white light flashed, and the zombie's repugnant wings were sealed in translucent glacial ice. Han Li didn't spur on the two projections to kill this ghostly being. Instead, he indicated for the weeping soul beast to do the honors. The weeping soul beast faltered slightly before immediately springing through the air with an elated expression. Quickly landing beside Han Li, it unleashed its soul-devouring light from its nostrils again, reducing this zombie into yin-chi as well before devouring it, then thumping its chest with glee. These two were both powerful ghostly beings that had been cultivating within the infernal river for countless years, so they were most definitely rare delicacies for the weeping soul beast. Hanley smiled at the sight of the ecstatic weeping soul beast, and a plan suddenly began to hatch in his mind. He carefully appraised the weeping soul beast before issuing some instructions. The weeping soul beast listened with wide eyes before nodding emphatically. Black light flashed from its entire body, and it transformed into a demon beast with a single horn on its head and arcs of lightning revolving around its limbs. It was a spitting image of the infernal lightning beast that had almost hunted down Han Li earlier, except it was slightly smaller in size. Han Li nodded with a pleased smile upon seeing this before waving a hand toward the infernal lightning beast, and it shrank down to only several inches in size before disappearing up his sleeve. He then brought out his high zenith invisibility talisman again to conceal himself, then entered through the palace gates. The palace consisted of a main hall with a smaller hall on the side, and Han Li went directly into the larger main hall. The interior of the hall was very clean, and it was completely empty aside from a dozen or so thick stone pillars. However, Han Li paid no heed to all of this, as his attention had been completely drawn to a small hole that was shimmering with white light at the center of the hall. He slowly made his way over to this hole, then peered into it to discover that it was a smooth round tunnel that led downward on a slanted angle, and there were no stairs or rungs to be seen. Furthermore, Han Li could only see a vast expanse of faint white light within the tunnel, thereby preventing him from seeing what laid at the bottom. After a brief moment of contemplation, Han Li slowly drifted down this tunnel. Along the way, he discovered that this tunnel was extremely deep. Even after descending for over 10,000 feet, there was still no end in sight. However, there were gusts of cold winds blowing toward him from down below, so there was clearly some kind of ventilated place at the conclusion of the tunnel. After descending for several thousand more feet, Han Li's expression changed slightly as he could hear the indistinct sounds of thunderclaps and beastie roars, as well as the occasional earth-shattering boom that made the stone walls of the tunnel around him tremor and quake. Han Li began to slow down in his descent while releasing his spiritual sense to survey the situation up ahead. Moments later, a film of piercing white light appeared down below, and he had reached the exit. After sweeping through the area with his spiritual sense, he found that there was nothing lurking down there. He was reassured by this discovery and landed soundlessly onto the ground below, then quickly passed through the white film of light. On the other side, he found himself in another massive hall that was several times larger than the one above it, and also vastly more lavish in its construction as well. Not only was the floor paved with flawless white jade, there were gems the size of large bowls embedded onto the walls and ceiling of the hall. These gems shimmered with a gentle white light that illuminated the entire hall. The spiritual chi in this area was also a lot more abundant than that of area up above, and there were spirit herbs and spirit flowers of all types of different colors growing in 2 miniature flower gardens on either side of the hall. All of the plants were extremely vibrant and shimmering with faint spiritual light, clearly having been nurtured here for countless years. However, Han Li merely looked away with a disinterested furrow of his brows. He was immediately able to identify that even though these plants were quite rare, they were mostly renowned for their beauty and aesthetic appeal rather than any practical applications. However, Han Li was only able to see most of the hall as a small portion of it was currently enshrouded in dense blood mist and arcs of lightning that were flashing violently. Clumps of blood mist and lightning intertwined with one another at low altitudes over a certain section of the hall, tumbling and exploding incessantly as they fought for dominance. However, it was quite clear that the arcs of lightning were far more powerful than the blood mist. If it weren't for the fact that there were countless green threads and gusts of yin winds whizzing through the mist to reinforce it, it would have most likely have been vanquished by the arcs of lightning already. Even so, fist-sized balls of lightning were still being manifested amid rumbling thunderclaps, then exploding to tear through large swaths of blood mist, thereby placing it firmly on the back foot. The blood mist completely obstructed Han Li's vision, but it was most likely the case that it had been conjured up by Di Shui in conjunction with the other demon monarchs. Amid the flashes of lightning, Han Li could indistinctly make out the silhouettes of two single-horned beasts, both of which were roaring with fury. There were two infernal lightning beasts unleashing a relentless barrage of fearsome attacks, so it was no wonder that the demon monarchs were severely on the back foot. Han Li was quite stunned by this observation, and after spectating the battle for a while, he turned his gaze downward, upon which his pupils abruptly contracted. Directly down below the vast expanse of blood mist was a green pond that was several tens of feet in size. There was white mist as well as rich spiritual chi swirling around the pond, and there was also an indistinct layer of crimson light over the surface of the water as well. Is that the divine infernal river elixir? Han Li made his way over to the pond, but he didn't pause to examine it for too long. Instead, he continued to survey his surroundings as if he were searching for something. All of a sudden, his eyes lit up as he caught sight of the motionless Yuan Yao and Yan Li standing in an obscure corner of the palace. Both of them wore stiff wooden expressions, seemingly completely unmoved by the intense battle taking place nearby. Han Li had witnessed the restrictions being cast on these two women, so he knew that their consciousness was still intact, but they were unable to control their bodies at all. He was relatively confident in his ability to break restrictions of this nature. After taking a glance at the intense battle that was raging within the palace, Han Li repressed the elation in his heart before carefully turning his attention to other sections of the hall. He had not forgotten about the ghostly beings that he'd encountered on his way here, and there were definitely other high-grade ghostly beings that had snuck into this place as well. He didn't want to save Yuan Yao and Yan Li only to be ambushed by those troublesome beings. Prior to discovering the locations of those hidden ghostly beings, it would be very unwise to set his plan into motion. Thus, he released his spiritual sense toward every section of the hall aside from the one where the battle was taking place, but didn't discover anything amiss. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly, and after a brief moment of contemplation, a hint of faint blue light flashed through his eyes. This place was fraught with peril, so he naturally didn't dare to unleash his spirit eyes to their full extent. He merely drew on as little spiritual power as possible to activate this ability before rapidly sweeping his gaze around the entire hall. As a result, he was finally able to discover something. In the corner of the palace, furthest away from where the battle was taking place, there was a cloud of faint green chi hovering in the air. Even looking at it using his spirit eyes, the cloud of green chi was still extremely faint, as if it were completely transparent. Was that the ghostly being that had infiltrated this place? Han Li contemplated his situation momentarily before deciding to take a risk. A sharp burst of blue light erupted from his eyes as he attempted to glean the true appearance of this unknown being. As a result, he saw a crystal ball-like object hovering at the center of the cloud of green chi, and it was slowly rotating on the spot. In the instant that Han Li caught sight of that object, it immediately stopped rotating, and a wisp of green light appeared over its surface before disappearing in a flash. Han Li's expression changed slightly upon seeing this, and the blue light in his eyes was instantly snuffed out. He could sense that the bead seemed to have detected his gaze in the instant that he caught sight of it, but he was confident that he'd reacted quickly enough to avoid exposing his location. Even if that bead possessed a powerful enough spiritual sense to detect his presence, it wouldn't dare to release its spiritual sense with such reckless abandon to search for him. If it released too little of its spiritual sense, there was no way that it'd be able to bypass the high zenith invisibility talisman's concealment effect. But if too much of its spiritual sense was released, then it would immediately be detected by the demon monarchs and infernal lightning beasts. Han Li was sure that this ghostly being definitely wouldn't engage in such a reckless endeavor. Moments later, a burst of relatively feeble spiritual sense swept over the spot where he was standing, but it completely failed to detect his presence as it continued onward. Han Li heaved an internal sigh of relief in response. However, before he had a chance to consider how he was going to take Yen Yao and Yan Li away from here without blowing his cover, a thunderous roar suddenly erupted from within the blood mist in the hall, and the battle took a drastic turn. The blood mist tumbled and surged as brilliant purple light erupted, following which a silhouette began to rapidly expand within the mist. In the blink of an eye, the purple blood puppet emerged from the mist, having already reached over 200 feet tall, and it was still swelling in size with reckless abandon. One of the crimson-robed figures was also standing atop one of the puppet's shoulders, with his hands clasped behind his back. Chapter 1, 1501 Opportunity. As soon as the massive puppet emerged, crimson light flashed through its 6 eyes, and it abruptly made a grabbing motion to summon a huge crimson axe into his grasp, then swung it through the air with devastating force. The massive axe came crashing down like a small mountain, and even before it had even struck anything, gusts of ferocious winds had been swept upon around it. The silver arcs of lightning down below all tremored violently as a result, looking as if they were going to split apart. A beastly roar erupted from within the lightning, and the arcs of lightning suddenly intertwined with one another as if they had sprung to life. They converged to form a silver lightning sword amid a series of rumbling thunderclaps, then pierced straight up into the air. An earth-shattering boom erupted as the lightning sword struck the blade of the axe, upon which both of them shattered and disappeared into nothingness. Lightning then flashed once again as several azure claw projections that were each around 10 feet in length appeared before hurtling directly toward the purple blood puppet. The crimson-robed figure standing atop the puppet's shoulder harumphed coldly upon seeing this. He opened his mouth to expel a mouthful of blood essence, then made a grabbing motion before swinging his arm through the air. The ball of blood essence transformed into a crimson spear and hurtled through the air at his behest. The crimson spear pierced through several claw projections in the blink of an eye, and was just about to disappear into the lightning down below when silver light suddenly flashed, and a projection of an infernal lightning beast's head that had been expanded to several times its actual size emerged from within the lightning. The projection opened its mouth to devour the crimson spear, then blasted forth an extremely thick arc of lightning in retaliation. The bolt of lightning transformed into a silver worm mid-flight, but right at this moment, crimson light flashed within the purple blood puppet's eyes, following which 2 streaks of crimson light shot forth, striking the lightning worm with unerring accuracy. Both the lightning and streaks of crimson light clashed and disappeared in unison. Following their first lightning-fast exchange, the purple blood puppet and the crimson-robed figure appeared to be evenly matched with the infernal lightning beast. However, countless green threads suddenly shot forth from the blood mist in the air, instantly converging toward a single spot amid a flash of green light, to form a slender humanoid figure standing atop a golden flower. It was none other than Mu Qing. At the same time, fierce yin winds swept up nearby, and the white-haired beauty also appeared. Both of them wore grave expressions as they scrutinized the projection of the beastly head before them with intense, unblinking eyes. A ferocious look appeared on the projection's face upon seeing this, following which lightning flashed violently down below and another similar projection appeared. Except this one was slightly smaller and the horn on its head was a little thinner than that of the first projection. The white-haired beauty's expression darkened even further at the sight of the 2 infernal lightning beast head projections, and she murmured, "To think that there were 2 infernal lightning beast here. It had always been a mystery to me how fellow Taoist Jew had fallen here, but everything makes sense now. What's the point of thinking about such things at a time like this? The divine elixir here is connected to the spirit vein in this place, so we have to buy Liu Zhu more time for him to sever this connection and secure the elixir. The 3 of us have no choice but to risk our lives here." The crimson-robed figure harumphed coldly, seemingly in a rather foul mood. Mao Qing and the white-haired beauty glanced at one another upon seeing this. The crimson-robed figure's attitude wasn't all that strange. After all, any one of them would be absolutely furious if their avatar had been destroyed under inexplicable circumstances. Fellow Taoist Di Shui, it's been a long time since your avatar was destroyed outside. And that happened before the second infernal lightning beat returned, so there must be a third party involved. They've either remained outside to ambush us as soon as we leave, or they've entered this place as well. Perhaps they're right here in this hall, spectating our battle against these 2 infernal lightning beasts. Mu Qing said with a cold light in her eyes. So what if that's the case? We're too busy fending off these 2 beasts to worry about anything else. Speaking of which, I've been unable to detect the tracking mark I planted in Han Brat's body this entire time. So it looks like he really was killed by the other infernal lightning beast. That's a real shame. The white-haired beauty sighed. For the infernal lightning beast to return so quickly indicates that Han Brat is most definitely dead. So there's no point in thinking about him now. Our main priority is to take care of these 2 infernal lightning beasts. Even though they're not very intelligent, their lightning attribute powers are extremely troublesome for us to deal with. Only fellow Taoist Liu Zhu among us isn't susceptible to the powers of lightning, but he's also the only one who can sever the spirit vein, so we can only hold on to the best of our abilities here. As for the ones that killed my avatar outside, they've been too scared to reveal themselves even after all this time. So they're clearly not powerful enough for us to worry about. All we have to do is be a little more cautious, so we don't get struck by any sneak attacks from those cowards. The crimson-robed figure said in a cold voice. All of a sudden, one of the beastly head projections before them suddenly swelled dramatically in size, before opening its cavernous mouth and hurtling toward the three demon monarchs. Meanwhile, the other projection lowered its head, and dazzling light flashed from its single horn as it blasted several thick bolts of lightning toward the trio. At the same time, the two infernal lightning beasts down below were summoning their powers of lightning too, create more balls of silver lightning before hurling them toward the blood mist in a frenzy. The white-haired beauties darkened as a massive ghostly projection with a head of disheveled hair appeared behind her. Gusts of violent grey yin winds erupted from the projections, mouth while countless azure threads shot forth from Mu Qing's body. Neither of them dared to grow complacent in this perilous situation. As for the crimson-robed figure, he merely stood still on the spot. But the purple blood puppet beneath his feet had opened all six of its eyes as wide as it could to blast forth 6 pillars of crimson light. At the same time, the blood mist down below tumbled and surged violently, sweeping toward the balls of lightning in retaliation. Thus, the fierce battle between the 3 demon monarchs and the 2 infernal lightning beasts continued. Tumbling blood mist and powerful flashes of lightning instantly inundated the 3 demon monarchs again, while Han Li stood near the entrance of the hall with his brows tightly furrowed. Without that cloud-green chi lurking in that corner, everything would be quite simple. All he had to do was rush in when the demon monarchs and infernal lightning beasts were completely absorbed in their battles, then rescue the 2 women before making his escape. All of the demon monarchs clearly held the divine infernal river elixir in extremely high regard, so it was very unlikely that they'd risk jeopardizing all their plans by coming after him. However, with that mysterious cloud of green chi hanging there, Han Li's main concern was that it would step in as soon as he sprang into action. In that case, he would be in deep trouble. Han Li didn't want to take such a risk, so his mind was rapidly scrambling for a viable alternative. As time slowly passed, the infernal lightning beast and demon monarchs began to unleash more and more of their abilities, and the battle had become extremely intense. The 2 infernal lightning beasts seemed to be aware that the demon monarchs were only buying time for Liu Zhu, so the longer the battle dragged on, for the more violent and frustrated they became. As such, their attacks were also growing more powerful, and every single bolt of lightning erupting from their horns had become several times thicker than they were during the initial phase of the battle. With every blast of lightning, one of the demon monarchs was sure to be forced back a few steps, and it was quite clear that the 2 beasts held a significant upper hand. However, it was still an extremely difficult task for them to defeat the demon monarchs and evict them from this place in a short time. Han Li surveyed the situation through narrowed eyes before slowly drifting through the air. Regardless of what happened, he had to get closer to Yuan Yao and Yan Li first. As for what happened after that, he would just have to adapt as the situation continued to unfold. In any case, he had to save these 2 women. In order to avoid blowing his cover, Han Li was naturally moving very slowly. All of the beings within the hall far outstripped him in terms of cultivation base, and even after using his high zenith invisibility talisman, there was still a very high chance that he could be discovered if a body integration stage being were to focus their spiritual directly toward his general vicinity. Thankfully, the demon monarchs and infernal lightning beasts were far too busy engaged in battle to be searching through the hall with their spiritual sense. Thus, Han Li was finally able to land beside the 2 women after skirting around the battle taking place within the hall, and he heaved a long sigh of relief before immediately turning his attention to Yuan Yao. At such close quarters, Han Li was able to identify that there was a series of barely visible crimson lines running along the delicate skin on her face. These crimson lines were as thin as strands of hair, and without his spirit eyes to further enhance his vision, he wouldn't even have been able to see them despite how close he was standing to the 2 women. Han Li's brows furrowed upon seeing this. These 2 women had been restricted through the use of some kind of strange blood talismans. and it was quite clear that this was a type of extremely potent evil technique. So both his divine devil-bane lightning and spirit-engulfing heavenly flames would most likely be quite effective here. However, he had stationed his spirit-engulfing fire raven at the entrance, so his divine devil-bane lightning was the only tool available to him to lift this restriction. Of course, this wasn't a good time to strike. If he were to break this restriction now, his cover would immediately be blown, and he couldn't afford for that to happen at this point. With that in mind, Han Li withdrew his gaze before turning his attention toward the cloud of green chi. This thing definitely had something to do with those ghostly beings outside, and Han Li didn't believe for a single instant that it was merely a neutral bystander. This was most definitely not the right time to strike, so he could only engage this mysterious in a contest of patience. As these thoughts flashed rapidly through Han Li's mind, he quickly decided to take a conservative approach. Furthermore, the most important factor to be taken into consideration here, was that the most powerful being among the Earth Abyss demon monarchs, Liu Zu, was still nowhere to be seen. Prior to ascertaining Liu Zu's location, Han Li definitely wouldn't dare to take any reckless risks. Thus, Han Li turned away from the cloud of green chi and fixed his gaze on the strange pond in the hall, wondering if Liu Zu was situated deep within this pond. After all, this pond was the only place that anyone could hide within this palace. Unfortunately, the mist hovering around the pond was capable of cutting off one's spiritual sense, so Han Li was unable to glean the situation within the pond. He could only sense that the white mist was imbued with abundant spiritual chi, the purity of which he had never seen before. He felt as if just inhaling a lungful of this mist would save him several days of arduous cultivation. This was why Han Li immediately determined that the water in this pond was the so-called divine infernal river elixir. Han Li was initially quite perplexed, wondering why the demon monarchs didn't simply scoop up the elixir in the pond before running away. After all, despite how powerful the two infernal lightning beasts, there was no way that they'd be able to keep the demon monarchs from securing the divine elixir, particularly when they were situated directly over the pond. However, Han Li quickly understood why this was the case after a brief moment of contemplation. The pond either had some powerful restrictions set up around it that even the demon monarchs were wary of, or some other prerequisite had to be satisfied before they could try to secure the elixir. Perhaps Liu Zu's absence had something to do with this. With that in mind, Han Li was even more intent on waiting for the situation to unfold further. Thus he stood still beside the two women, waiting for the outcome for the battle above the green pond, or for the cloud of green chi to finally do something. Even though he couldn't repress the tracking marks in his body for too long, it was quite apparent from the intensity of the battle raging within the hall that it wasn't going to be a prolonged one, either. An opportunity could present itself at any moment. Sure enough, after a short while, the two infernal lightning beasts had finally lost their patience and begun to truly attack with all their might.